And we are live on your favourite party of the week, your Oz Property Investors Live on a Wednesday night. We bring the big names and have the big fun. How you going, Kate? How's your day been?
Yeah, really good. It's great to be on the show. I've actually smashed it home in time from an auction. So, yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. It's been a big day.
Thank you very much for joining us. You're very. I appreciate you're probably a lady in demand. So thanks, or person in demand. So thanks for coming on and spending some time with us. You've been
pleasure.
Been a big kind of sort of catalyst for this group and for us. So how was your day, Joe?
Mate, my day was fine. It's coming up to end of financial year, so it's getting crazy. It's getting crazy at work. Everyone's looking for little business expenses and all that fun stuff. So we're chock-a-block at the moment. So that's fun. What about you, Jeff? How was your day, mate?
Yeah, so my day was pretty nice and relaxed. Actually, started off with a bacon egg roll and a coffee with a good friend of mine up here in Wollongong, and we just chilled out and did some things. And I eventually did some work as well for anybody watching this who. So it was a good day. It was a beautiful day
today.
I don't know. I hope not, but we'll see how we go. But it was a good day. I'm sort of itching to get into the next property, next deal. So I mean, yeah, love property and love chatting it. So that's why we're here tonight. So without further ado, let's get into a life hack, Joe. And kind of
Can you do yours, Jeff? Because I just blanked on what mine was. What mine was.
Tell me about an airport. Yeah, I've got my life hack. I don't think was very effective, but take it for what it is. I have so many. At the moment, I have 3 things plugged into my laptop here, my MacBook, and I've got this little dongle thing which you can plug in a whole bunch of USBs. So that's if anybody ever needs to plug in a whole bunch of USBs into it, and you don't have enough USB ports, that is an absolute hack. So, and apparently it's sort of stopped working because my mic wasn't that great. So now it's good. So if you're gonna get that, get something top of the range. That's my life hack, Joe. Wasn't yours something about goals or something?
No, I've figured it out, right? Okay. Well, one of the things is I read a book years and years ago. It was called 100 Things by a guy named Sebastian Terry, whose friend sadly passed away. He jumped off a roof, landed into a pool, like tried to jump into a pool and then didn't make it. And he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a list of 100 things that I've always wanted to do, and I'm going to get started to doing it. And then what he found out along the journey is that what he noticed is that he would always, before this situation happened, he would always try and put the face mask on. When the face mask drops down, the first thing in an airplane they say is make sure that you put your own face mask on so you can then help 6, 7, 8, 10, 15 other people. And he's like, what I was trying to do at the beginning was help so many other people initially, but I didn't have the skill set. I didn't have the money. I didn't have the resources behind me. And I wasn't putting my own face mask on first, my own protective mask. So one of the things that I always like to think of is don't feel like you're being selfish if you're trying to get better at something. If you're spending a lot of time educating yourself, if you're educating yourself on property, if you're spending too much time at work trying to further your education or get better at a certain skill, what you're doing is putting your own face mask on so you can have the resources and the tools in the future to be able to help other people. So not that I'm allowed to give out those type of permissions, but that is my life hack. Don't feel guilty that you're being selfish, because you will be able to eventually help a lot more people with a lot more resources behind you. So that's my little life hack when I feel like that's mine. I like that.
We should call it Joe's Ditty, because my life hack's usually about 5 seconds and yours turns into about sort of a minute and a half. And I feel like I need to take notes. So I'm like, Joe, I'm at the water cooler here listening to Joe's wisdom. So Kate, I reckon I could think of at least 3 life hacks for you, Kate. We're just looking at your background there. If you don't
I've got 2. I'll give you 2.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, the first one's a serious one. It's a work one, but it reduces stress and it just keeps everything afloat for me. It means I can go to bed and wake up to a fresh day literally every day. I clear my email every day. So I'm one of those people that has the balloon on the email screen, only for a moment till somebody stuffs it up. But I file everything, I sort everything. So that's my first hack, and it's worked for me for years. The other one is a little bit more frivolous and selfish, but if you're into your wine and you've got a little cellar or a big cellar or whatever, you don't want to drink your really good wine when you're not appreciating it. So if you have all your mates over and it gets a bit out of control and then someone cracks the really special wine that you were saving for whatever, the way to stop that is you colour code your wines with ribbons. And we've got some ribbons on wine necks, and there's a couple of colours there that say don't touch without permission. That's how you do it.
Oh, I like that. I think that's probably the best life hack we've had on the show, and Joe's had some crackers. The reason I like that is because it's like don't break in case of emergency, or open up in case of emergency. If you've yeah, I love. I think that's why maybe you and I got along quite well quite quickly, because I clear my inbox. I feel a little irksome if I haven't cleared my inbox. If I'm not,
exactly.
I feel like there's stuff that
I am absolutely fine to let that thing just tick away, and just if it's important, someone's going to tell me. That's maybe that's not the right way to go about it.
I've seen your inbox, Joe. I've seen your inbox, and it every time I see it, it scares me. I'm just glad I don't have it. I don't think I could fall asleep if I had your inbox. But we've already got the questions coming through, and I just want to throw this up because this is from Adam Maney. I don't know if you remember. Sorry, we've hidden Kate, but I just wanted just to kind of pump you up. You and Adam, we've had on the show. I think he's got 12 properties. He does some good things. So just wanted to share that with you straight away up front. So yeah, make you. Yeah. So thanks for. So Joe, before we get into our kind of segments, do you want to ask me a question? We should start this show, Joe, of how do I know the guests? Because I think all these guests are kind of.
That was one of the things that I wanted to stop off before we jump into the next section, was actually asking the question: what is your guys' relationship? And like, how do you? Because you kind of said this is the catalyst for the group. I didn't even know that. How do you guys know each other?
Jeff, this one's for you.
It is. So just quickly, so Steve Ignite Mega Millionaire Conference 2018 in Melbourne. And so I went and caught up for a coffee with Kate. And I think I read your book prior to coming down. We reached out. And this is how humble and kind of down-to-earth Kate is. So caught up, had a coffee, had just a catch-up and talked property and sort of it helps me with my kind of clarify some of the things I was looking to do. But I went to the conference and I was just in such an open mind that I believe I met you somewhere along the way there, Joe. And then I believe if I hadn't had that catch up with Kate, I don't think I would have been as open-minded to. I love networking, but at the same time, I think you were the catalyst for me connecting with Joe, and therefore then Joe pressuring me. You didn't have to pressure me that hard to start the group. So I think you are probably the number one cat. We should send you a key ring with number one member. Because
that's really special. I think you've overrated it, but I remember our catch up and you were just, so dedicated to your journey. And that's what came through when you sent me that email and you reached out. How can I not catch up? It's a really big industry and it's a great industry. And there are some people along the way that you remember when you start your journey and they shape you or steer you. And, I've benefited over the years from a lot of really good, generous people. And you've got to pay it back, and you get a lot out of it when you do see other people, building wealth or getting familiar with it, or, being able to question it in a safe place and work out what strategy is for them. I'm really passionate about it. Yeah.
You never know what a small gesture might do for somebody else. You won't realize the massive difference it has. Exactly the same thing I took an Uber ride with this guy. That was my first kind of foray into the industry. I'm like, why are you driving an Uber in this sensational Mercedes? He's like, yeah, I bought it for my birthday. It's my birthday present because I hit X level of equity, and that's what I said I'd buy. And then the next day, I'm like, can I just hang out with you for a day? And then he just drove me around to all these properties. And then it's those little things that doesn't take much. Well, I mean, you spent a whole day with me, but like a little coffee can just spark that joy. And that's, I guess, kind of what we want to do with this group is these type of conversations with experts like yourself, Kate, where we can add as much value. So what we've got here is a bit of an advertisement for another great resource that we've got, and then we'll jump into the the introduction. That's what it's called.
Scott Agate.
You would have seen him on the 7 p.m. project campaigning against agent underquoting. Scott is an expert negotiator through and through. Every single day, he is negotiating with real estate agents to get the best price for his clients. To give you a bit of a background, Scott has been working in real estate since 1995, and as a real estate agent, built up 3 Bell franchises. He was the guy teaching the agent all the tips and tricks to get the most out of the buyers. However, Scott realised that there was actually no one on the side of the person buying the property, and he saw them constantly letting emotion get in the way and paying way over for the property. And that's why he created Hello House, Australia's first property negotiation as a service business, where he is on the side of the buyer. In hot markets like we have now, you need absolutely every single edge that you can get. These agents are trained professionals and they are there to get the most money out of you, which is why you need to have an expert of your own in your own corner. The way it works, you find the property, then Scott will come in at the negotiation phase and take over for you. This is how you'll get the property for its true value. He'll ensure that you don't overpay. He comes in, knocks the real estate agent down on price, no more agent games, no more tricks, no more tactics. He is there for you. Scott has been kind enough to offer us an amazing discount on his service, and I've personally just seen a friend pay $20,000 more on a property because of these agent games. Reach out to him with the link below. It'll be the best property investment you will ever make.
Joe, thanks to Chris Dusting for putting that together for us. But that's a good Joe's mug. I'll get us all back on. I have to press a few buttons.
There I am. That music was sensational. I was. It's like a what are those things called? The trailer. It's like a trailer to a sensational.
Carry the fire, Joe. So, Anyway, so let's
run down. Yeah. Who is this lovely lady that we've got in front of us?
So, Kate, I took this bio slightly off your website because I wanted to make sure I captured all of the gold. So, you completed a degree with honours at chemistry at Monash University in '96. So, I didn't want to say '96 because you don't look you look in your late 20s, early 30s. So, you held a passion for property though before you. Thank you. Long before your career in science. So, I'll hold back a little bit because I want to hear. We love to hear about the first property people purchased. So you've worked as a real estate agent, mortgage broker before becoming a buyer's advocate. So I like how you use advocate instead of agent. I think that sounds more professional for me. But and you're a successful investor in your own right, and you walk the talk as well. So some accolades I think that are really sort of special to hear about is that you did win the #1 National Buyers Agent of the Year award in 2018. And you're also a finalist, and this one is amazing as well, in 2019, 2013. Actually, you finalist in 2019 for the Telstra Businesswoman of the Year. So just so many things you've done. You've done a lot of things in your time in property. So, is there anything that I missed that you're immensely proud of in your introduction?
Oh, that's really nice. I'm a mama as well. I'm very proud of that.
Probably the most important, a parent.
Yeah. And obviously, I run my own business, and that comes with all of its challenges and rewards, and I'm quite proud of that as well. I've got a fantastic team and written a book, so I've had a lot of fun along the way. But being able to do all of this and have a baby girl who's now in her teens, it's been a dream come true. The whole gamut.
I love it.
And also a step. If you've read Kate's book, a stepson as well. How's he? Because I remember his property journey. How's he? I mean, how's he going?
He's just bought his second, and he's rent vesting. So he's 26.
Love it.
Renting a teeny tiny place. So he's got it all worked out. He's optimized his cash flow. He's really driven. He's a chippy. So he's been able to do a really cool renovation on the last one in Geelong. So, yeah, I'm very, very proud. And I know that we've played a bit of a role in all of that, but he's been receptive and hungry, and he's worked hard. So, yeah, he's on his way.
I love it. And you were also previously the president for REBA. What is REBA?
Real Estate Buyers Agents Association. So I hold the president gig still. I've been in the role now for just on 2 years, and there's around 90 of us in the country, and we've got a lot in common, and there's a strict criteria to come on board, and we offer support to each other, particularly through stuff like COVID. But yeah, it's a wonderful bunch of people. We're all independent, and I love flying the Reba flag. Takes a bit of work, but there's a lot of reward too.
I can only
definitely.
imagine.
Running a community, I can imagine. Imagine it's even more intense when you're at the sort of at that level.
It's a real body, yeah.
So let's get into the questions and let's get into the questions of the content, because we've actually had a couple already come through, and everybody's keen to hear from you. So, but before we get into it, the thing we'd love to hear from people is, tell us about your first investment and the journey to get to it. How did it all get to it? Yeah, tell us about, yeah.
I had fire in my belly. I just really wanted to buy property, and it was not so much about having a roof over my head, although having my own roof over my head had a lot of appeal. I wanted to build wealth, and I understood the power of leveraging. Put down a little bit, you watch it grow. I'd been tracking auction results. I'd been watching auctions in my teens. I had an affinity with placing, an appraised value on a property as well. So I had a feeling that could be a really good career. But for whatever reason, I pursued science, and probably, I had a family that had high hopes for me doing something in the medical or science field. And you're hardly going to say, I really, really want to be a real estate agent when you've got all that pressure on you. But it is what it is. So my very first property, I was working in a Coles deli through uni, and an honours degree in science is a 4-year course. So I had a lot of nights that I could work at the local Coles, and I was doing lots of hours there. I was all right with night work, and it paid really well. I did weekends as well. So I was on pretty much the equivalent to, a full-time basic salary at that stage, because I was copping all this permanent overtime. So I was able to save really quickly, and I had $65,000 back when, the property of my dreams was 150. So I'd done really well. I'd smashed it. Wow. And my dad was not all that keen to see me jump into property and to borrow money, because dads don't really like you to have debt when you don't have to, and especially when they're, baby boomer dads who have accounting backgrounds. So I had to push against that and find my own way. And unfortunately, the deal that I found that I thought would be a great start was a house in Bentley, and it was it was definitely a late 50s, circa 1960 house. It would have been awesome. Bentley's a, middle ring, southeastern suburb with village and train, and it's a really good spot. And my dad took me out of it and steered me into something new, low maintenance. You don't want something that's going to require maintenance. You don't want all this debt around your neck. I ended up buying off the plan a townhouse in a small development, and was it a mistake? I could have bought something better, but was it a disaster? Not at all. It did really well. The builder was making me an offer to buy it before it settled, which is always a good sign. And that was merely because I timed it well with Morley Alec. I wanted to be near the water. I couldn't afford Brighton, which I was familiar with, so I went where I could afford. And after a year in that property, I saw the potential for the gain. I'd been living in it, so there was no capital gains tax. I could springboard into a better asset with a way more optimised land to asset ratio, meaning the values in the land, not the dwelling. And I arguably bought something that, in fairness, it probably had a land to asset ratio of 102%, because without the house on it, it was probably worth more. It was vile. My mum wouldn't even come inside. You could smell it from the street. It had squatters in it. It was barely habitable. Wow. Probably would have been stung by council if they knew we were trying to live in it. So it was just, one of those exercises that turned out to be such a great experience, because in the space of 13, 14 months, I'd sold one and gone into a second. And the only regret that I have is probably should have held the first one, because it had all that equity and I laid down all that cash. But, there's some of the things in land, and that's the first big mistake I made after buying off the plan. I sold something I didn't need to.
Yeah, that's such a common story, isn't it? You just don't know about it. If you don't know that you shouldn't be selling it, then you're just going to sell it, because how else am I going to get how else am I going to get there? I'm going to have to sell it.
I didn't understand how borrowing equity and springboarding into something else worked. I hadn't talked to a mortgage broker. That was a mistake that I made. And I'm not suggesting that bankers can't be helpful, but the one that I saw wasn't, and many aren't. It's just transactional and just set you up with a loan. So for someone to say to you, no, hang on a second, this is actually a good little performer, it will tenant really well, it won't give you any grief, you've got deductions here still. I'll make the point that I don't chase deductions, but when they're there, I'll grab them. And, the property that I purchased was super close to the water. It was on a huge block. It was subdividable if I wanted to. It was a disgusting odd house that I was happy to live in. I could walk to the shops and the station. You know, it was a good move, even though my parents didn't want to visit me there. It performed. So, you know, there's something to be said for doing your homework and getting good advice.
Yeah.
There you go.
100%. What were some of the did you add value to that property, or did you
made it livable?
Just cleaned it.
I knew that its destiny was to have a bulldozer go through it, whether it was me pushing a dozer through it or whether it was selling it and someone else doing that. That's exactly what happened. So, you know, we just made it livable. I was at that stage, you know, 22, 23, living in something pretty rugged, and, you know, in a relationship and wanting the house not to completely destroy the relationship. it was an exciting journey, but it was not for the faint-hearted. And, you know, it was a lot of sacrifice to have something that, you know, your friends are proud of you because you're having a crack, but it wasn't an aspirational dwelling by any means.
It's not something you show at the barbecue. Something you mentioned.
We had a lot of barbecues there, but, you know, it was just like the spit out the back and the big party. It was that kind of house. It looked like a really bad share house.
So you're previously a mortgage broker? Did I read something there?
Yeah. So my story is a bit of I call it a patchwork quilt, but I worked in the industry for a little while, and I had various roles. I've worked in sales and marketing roles at you know, companies that were related to the chemical industry, or, you know, I later went into packaging and was working in the technical part of that business. But I kept coming back to real estate. I gave real estate a go when I was 28, 29, 30. It was a big move, and it was a scary move because that's a commission role. I'd come out of a corporate role where, you know, I'd won an award and I felt special and appreciated, and the salary was okay. It wasn't brilliant, but yeah. And I thought, if I don't do this and quench this thirst, give it a crack once and for all, I'm just going to die wondering. And I don't want to be in this corporate role earning a salary and starting to resent it. So I knew I had to give it a crack. And I'm a very consultative style personality. So I thought, can I be that consultant that's respected in real estate, you know, on the selling side? And you absolutely can, but it can be a little bit soul destroying at the start when you're trying to establish yourself. And a lot of people don't like or trust real estate agents. And when you're just lumped into that without having an opportunity to prove that you've got your own style and you're not like what they're fearing, that's really hard. And, you know, I was young enough and emotional enough to really take that personally. And that was probably, you know, aside from going on that cycle with vendors where you meet them, you list their property, you manage their expectations, you juggle the buyers, you give feedback, you coordinate campaign, you make right decisions along the way, then you have your sale day. It starts to become, for me, it felt like it was monotonous, and I wanted more consultation involved, not just vendor consultation. I love the buyer consultation. You can't really do that as a listing agent. You can talk to them about your properties, and occasionally you'll help a buyer on something else, whether it's altruism or you know, you're getting their listing. But I just wasn't getting enough buyer consultation to be happy with that. And then when I had my little girl on the way, I thought to myself, right, I've got 8 months to sort out a plan before I'm in a role where I can't, you know, work crazy nights and weekends and stuff like that. I'll have an infant. So I did my financial services Cert 4 and did mortgage broking, flew to Sydney when I probably shouldn't. I didn't have a very big bump, so I told them that I was less weeks pregnant than I really was, and pulled it off, came back, and then had a baby. And at that stage, I was able to work around her sleep time. I'm not too bad with working around the clock and doing weird hours, and you can with a file. You're not really ringing anyone. You're working on, you know, on a platform, or you're dealing with assessors overseas. So that was cool. It worked out. I learned a lot. I did it for 4 years, and it was the apprenticeship that, you know, really helped establish my understanding of cash flow, lending policy, tax deductibility, credit assessing, guidelines, and it stuck with me. And probably the most valuable thing, aside from me understanding cash flow, which I think I did anyway, was just understanding what banks don't like. If you know what a bank's not going to like, not only will you save your client from a lot of upset, you'll also save a lot of time.
So one of the things that we get asked a lot is, give us a good broker. How do I identify a good broker? So how would you actually identify someone? What are some of the questions that you ask your mortgage broker to see if they're actually an investment grade, investment savvy mortgage broker?
Yeah, I think there's two parts. The first one is that they're really personable and responsive. You know, they get you, they can see what you're trying to achieve, and they understand your risk profile and, you know, your relationship dynamic, and they can give you the right guidance. And the next one is obviously the understanding of lending policy, tax deductibility, cash flows. You don't want a broker that doesn't think in numbers and wastes your time or suggests things that are missing the tax detail. So I think being really clear about a broker who knows how to put together a broad plan. They're not telling you what to buy or where to buy, but they're telling you how much you can spend this time around, what sort of yield you need to get, what outgoings you need to cap it at, and when you can go for the next one. And they've got to be able to holistically look at what you're trying to achieve and tell you whether it's doable or not. So if you're saying to your broker, I want to retire on $200,000 a year, passive income, before tax, out of property, and I want to retire in 15 years, well, they should ideally be able to tell you whether it's remotely possible, definitely possible, or if you're dreaming, or if you've got to make all of these changes, or what you can tweak. I think, you know, that's the essence of a good broker, someone who can think big picture and really help you plan.
So it's more around the strategy than sort of saying, okay, we're gonna take you to X bank, or we're going to take you to Y bank, who's going to get you a rate of 2.4%. Right, but what does that actually mean for me getting to 200K passive income?
100%. I think that's a really good saying when it comes to mortgage broking. If you win them on rate, you'll lose them on rate.
Yep.
In other words, have your clients because you're trusted and you're strategic. It's not about a short-term goal that you kick or, you know, shaving a little bit off a rate. It's about helping them get to their destination and partnering with them for a long time.
It's a thing I struggled with when I was when I did my foray into broking as well. Not to take it down my path, is that I sort of, a lot of people that I was working in the office with, they would sort of simply take any client, whereas I'd sort of say, okay, this customer is going to cause me grief down the track because they're going to refinance in a year, they're going to refinance in 18 months, and I'm going to get a clawback. So I would sort of aim to pick and choose and sort of actually aim to help people to sort of see that it's not all about the rate, or say to them, hey, look, you can either decide if you want the best rate, you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z to get to that situation. Whereas, or your alternative is you can go now, but it's going to cost you an extra 1%. What's more important to you at this stage? And then leave it up to the customer or leave it up to the client. Yeah.
Oh, look, I've seen people go for a cheap rate and they've lost their offset benefit. Well, if that represented, you know, tens of thousands of dollars, no short-term cheap rate is worth losing your offset benefit.
And that's probably one of the myths, and that kind of segues into one of the key reasons we wanted to get. We sort of see you as a bit of a mythbuster, Kate. I saw you. I saw there was a post you did on this, I think, as well. Was that somebody else? I see so much content these days, but I think it was you I saw it about. So, Joe, I saw you've written up a couple of myths. So throw them out to Kate. Let's kind of unpack those.
Yeah. Okay. Put me on the spot.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so one of the biggest myths is that, well, maybe it's not the biggest, but only properties surrounding the CBD will gain significant capital value. Yeah. How do we bust this myth? How do we make sure that this myth is busted?
Yeah, it's not about the CBD. It's not about only the CBD. So what I will say is long term, for the right asset in the inner ring or in a lot of middle ring suburbs, you'll do really well. But it's not restricted to that. I've had some incredible growth, and not just in the last COVID 12 months. I've had incredible growth in some of the regions. And, you know, take Geelong as an example. It outperformed Melbourne for a while there. So the important thing is not just about the suburb or, you know, how close it is to the city. It's understanding what the growth drivers are. And at the moment, we've got an aversion to small units in particular cities like Melbourne. We've got a love of houses with a bit of rear yard since COVID's broken. We always appreciate houses near the water. We love amenity and proximity to the city, but there are some suburbs that are close to the city that I'd steer clear of. So it comes down to a combination of things: the style of the dwelling, location of the dwelling, street that it's on, what sort of dwelling it is, what sort of strata fees you're facing if it's a strata property, and which city you're talking.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about because it's talked about a little bit, and it'll vary from city to city, of course. But inner ring versus middle ring, what does that actually? Do you have a definition of that, or is there not a?
Yeah, I've got a loose definition, and it's a good question, Jeff, because no one's actually perfectly defined it. But I work off the inner ring, a 10K radius.
Yeah.
The middle ring, 20K radius, and you can look at some areas and think, oh yeah, that might be outer ring, but really the outer ring is where our urban sprawl in a lot of cities is still developing. But if you take Melbourne as an example, 38 kilometres, you hit Frankston if you go south. Well, that's still got a lot beyond it. And, same can be said for going north and west. But the inner ring, if we look at the 10K radius, that's, you're getting all of those suburbs that are typically in a city like Melbourne, as an example, showing lots of period houses, because when the urban fringe was growing back at the turn of the century, it was the Victorian era. We were looking at Victorians being as far out of our city as 12 kilometres.
Well, at least you guys actually planned your city a little bit better than we have. Our city's just a shambles when it comes to traffic and direction and where everything's going. At least you've kind of gridded it, made it nice.
Oh, you're being too kind. There's a bit of mess to Melbourne as well. We've got a lot of urban planners that haven't thought through the impact of all of these estates and limited transport options for people to get to work and really difficult arterials to get to. So, if you commute, I think if you commute, at 5 a.m, is less than a third of your commute time at peak hour, that's an issue.
Wow. Yeah.
Interesting.
One of the other myth number 2. So we busted that one. Consider buying in the middle ring. The inner city is only the way to go. Number 2 is new versus old. Buying new is definitely the best way to go because it's brand new. It's easy to maintain. Great tax deductions, surely.
That must hurt you to say that, Joe. Did you have to practice for 50 times?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of not buying new. I actually really ideally want it to have at least 3 years on the clock, but ideally more. And the reason for that is a concept called land to asset ratio. So if you look at the property as a combination of the dwelling and the land, if the land component as a proportion of the price that you're paying is greater than 50%, that property has a decent chance of performing. Because even if the dwelling is super new, its rate of depreciation, if you've picked a good area, shouldn't be outstripping the rate of land depreciation long term. Now, if you've got it the wrong way around and the dwelling represents the highest proportion of the price you've paid, you'll be losing a lot of value, getting a bit of tax for sure, but losing a lot of value, and your land value won't be able to keep up with it. So your rate of depreciation will outstrip your rate of appreciation. And when that happens, you wind up with a property that can lose value for, the first few years at the least. And if you look at high-rise apartments with very low land to asset ratios, you check out what the purchaser paid and then what they sold it for when they got jack of it, you'll find that they've lost a fair amount of money. And there are a few exceptions to the rule, but you are relying on ridiculous paced capital growth for that one to be overridden. And I know Sydney saw it for a few years there, but I always say to someone, yeah, for sure, you dodged a bullet because the market went bananas. But had you put that same money into an established property where you got a greater proportion of land and you had a higher value of land than dwelling, you would have smashed it and done a lot better.
Yeah. I mean, this is right at the beginning of your story. You were told to buy new and off the plan, and because of that reason, but you would have said your opportunity cost would have been completely different.
Yeah.
The way I like to think about it is exactly that. There's a building with 200, 300 units in it, and all of a sudden your neighbor wants to leave and they really want to leave. So they're going to drop a price. And then your next door neighbor wants to leave as well. There's 300 people in that block. It's likely going to happen. They're going to drop their price to outsell that person. So it's just a race to the bottom. You've got nothing unique. You've got nothing different. I'm happy to move from this unit to that unit because it makes no difference for me. So I'm willing for the price to drop. But
you've identified a key issue there, Joe, and that is, your valuation ceiling. And if you've got distressed sales, now once you've settled and you don't like it anymore, that's not such a distressed sale. It's when you've put your deposit down and something's gone pear-shaped and you can't settle, and the developer on-sells it quickly to someone who can settle very, very quickly. And they're already retaining a 10% deposit in a lot of cases. You've potentially already got a 10% free kick. Now that discount will underpin all of the other values if the value gets wind of that. So it's why you'll often see on an off-the-plan contract that you can't publicly sell it through, a different agency if you want to sell before you settle. So on selling, they might limit your ability to on sell or keep it in-house and very secret.
I love it. Okay, well, another one is I'm too old to invest. One of the things that I've only got 5 years before I retire. Which we've got a comment.
Somebody actually asked a question. It's like that. It's like they've got access to our. I'm a little worried now.
That's scary. Cyber security is in question.
Soda Max. I'm
is it too late? Yeah. Look, that's a good question, and the short answer is technically no. From a bank regulation point of view, potentially, and I'll explain that. If you can demonstrate to a funder that the property that you're about to purchase has a neutral or a positive cash flow, it's not a lot of earthly reasons why they'd say no to you, because you're demonstrating, if I buy this property, my financial position is better. But if they're concerned about your ability to repay the debt, and I think a traditional lender will focus on this, they will want to understand how you're going to retire that debt. And they could make it quite hard for you. So let's say you've got 10 years to go in your working life and you've made that really obvious to them. You're probably not going to have the welcome mat roll out to you for a 30-year mortgage. You'll need to demonstrate what's called an exit strategy. And if your exit strategy is that you've got a willing child who's happy to, sign a stat dec or go on the loan with you, you might get around it that way. But from a technical point of view, let's say you're paying cash or your LVR is very, very low, or you've got a clear strategy that can demonstrate upon retirement you can retire this debt because whatever it might be, you've got funds that you can access. Well, then yes, anything is possible. So it's about getting the right technical advice on the borrowings. But from an investment point of view, I don't think you're ever too old. You are making things hard for yourself if you sign up for something from a capital growth point of view that has a really strong requirement for you to contribute a shortfall. So if the rent doesn't cover your out of pockets. Now, if you put yourself in that situation and it looks apparent that you need to be servicing this shortfall for many, many years, well, it will interrupt your retirement plans. So you need to think that through. I don't recommend buying a capital growth asset and liquidating it in 4 to 5 years. I think if that's the idea, let's bet farm, go for gold and try and get a win before I hang up the boots and enter into retirement. It carries a lot of risk. If you're in a really good market, you'll make your gain and then you'll pay some tax on it when you sell. But if you're in a volatile market or if things step backwards, you could risk your capital, and I don't like that idea. I think once you get that close to retirement, you shouldn't be taking big risks. That's when you back off with the risk.
Yeah. And that'll tie in nicely to what we'll talk about in some of the upcoming questions as well.
I like it. Okay, cool. One of the biggest things, one of the questions we get here is property is way overpriced. We are in a property bubble. How can it keep going up? So how do we bust this myth? I mean, maybe we don't. Maybe it's true. Maybe we are in a bubble and we're all going to blow up soon. But this is a tough.
This is how I describe it. So
just a caveat, a lot of these myth bustings, this is not financial advice, people. We're not saying that property only goes up because we've seen that.
You need something to trigger the growth drivers completely ceasing and being eliminated. And while we're in an environment where at the moment we've got a few growth drivers, I won't overplay an increasing population rate because we've got that on hold at the moment. But for a long time, we've had an increasing population. We haven't had wages growth, but we have had cheaper money. So borrowing capacities have gone up. And we've got, at the moment, what's called the wealth effect, which is when people are feeling wealthier, they make investment decisions. So there's certainly some growth drivers that are very evident there. And I know that there'll be doomsayers that say the bubble's got to burst because it has to. I remember, though, years and years ago, people saying the same thing. And, you know, even my dad was a bit scared when he knew about me buying a second property. And I'm glad he's not watching this. But, you know, I look at that back then, I could buy something for circa 200,000 and he was worried about me. But using my own house as an example, you know, I bought it for 802,000 in 2012 with my husband. And you know, that would have freaked a lot of people out. And it was the biggest purchase for me personally that I'd made in terms of, you know, cost magnitude.
Yeah.
And I had, you know, that voice in my head, you know, you're buying at the peak, but, you know, needless to say, it's moved significantly since then, as Yarraville has. But the person before me bought it for something like 32,000 back in 1975. And then I look at the title record and you can see it dating back to pounds. And I'm sure every person at some stage on that long journey, we've got about 13 or 14 transactions on this very property dating back to 1875. And, you know, everybody would have said, how can it keep moving? But, you know, here we are. So I think stopping yourself from moving forward because you think it can't go any further, you have to look at the history books.
Yeah, and what about let's say, I don't know, what if it does go up and you're sitting on the sidelines, right? Like, what is the biggest risk with investing into an asset that has proven itself time and time again, and that the banks are willing to lend like 90% of the thing? Like, that's the crazy thing about property. Property is so safe that the bank is willing to give you 90% of the mortgage. And I did a post before about it. Australia's global LVR is around 30%. So the value of property and the mortgages on property is 30%. Now, Jeff, I feel like I've done something here. You're pulling these faces like I've heard.
No, I just get a little nervous when you say that banks will see. Yeah, it's my risk background.
I think maintaining a healthy dose of risk and being prepared to question is really important. You know, to counter your question just before about how can it keep going up. I don't think it can keep going up at the crazy rate that it hasn't over the past 40 years. Although, having said that, the last 6 months have been arguably the fastest rate of growth that I've experienced in a very, very long time. But the reason I make that comment is when we transitioned from, you know, the 50s and 60s into the 70s, women had started working part-time, albeit part-time, and they weren't getting the same salary as their male counterparts. But that was an introduction to, you know, the family war chest. And then into the 80s, career women, we saw a lot of women with full-time jobs, still not at parity with their male counterparts. But again, the household income pot of gold was bigger. And then as women's salary started to build up and start to get closer to their male counterparts, all of a sudden we've got, particularly in the inner ring and affluent areas, we've got 2 working adults, so double income households. You can't really have a triple income household. So at some stage, that has to slow down, that rate of household income growth. And if we haven't got wages growth, that is a threat for us, most definitely. But we're also now seeing wealth being handed down through, you know, people getting inheritances. So we're seeing a lot of that type of activity as well. But I don't believe that we'll have exactly the same rate of housing capital growth as we've seen in the past 40 years looking forward.
Yeah, and this is where I'm kind of seeing asset selection being so much more important, where you can mess it up, where you will not get that. You might not. I don't think I'm allowed to say will when Jeff's on, but you might not get that capital growth because there's not going to be. Where is that extra value? Where is that extra income going to come from? We've had a great resurgence. It's gone up crazy over the past 20, 30 years, but where is? it's gotta slow down at some point. But if you're choosing assets that people that have the money that are there want to actually live in, then absolutely it's going to be something that's going to grow in value.
Yeah, you do have to keep an eye on area if you're looking for capital growth. And I think an important thing to flag that I will mention in this interview is capital growth is not the only return that you get out of property. And you've got to pick your journey, pick your strategy, because if you're just getting capital growth assets, you'll either hit your borrowing capacity limit pretty quickly, or you'll hit retirement, you'll still have out of pockets. And so you need to work out what your long-term strategy is. But to your point, Joe, if you're going for capital growth, you need to go looking for it in areas where people with money want to live. And I had a fantastic mentor and coach back in my very early days. And he said to me, money grows where money goes. And it was that simple.
Yeah.
You need to pick an area where people with money are aspiring to get into it if you're looking for sustained capital growth. There are lots of other things that create capital growth, but that one is the obvious one. So if you're going into a tightly held area where professionals are aspiring to live, you've got to also target the type of property that they want. There's no point buying a one-bedroom bedsit just to say that you've managed to land a property in a particular postcode. That defeats the purpose.
Yeah. So how do you identify some of those? What are some of the other ways to identify those capital growth areas?
Well, keeping your eyes open and going to auction is a very easy way to observe. And I don't want to sound condescending, but you can watch the bidders and gauge who the buyers are. And for anyone in Melbourne who's familiar with Melbourne, let's talk about places like Brunswick and Fitzroy North and, those grungy inner terracey, tightly held places where, you get great coffee and everyone has a, big beard and all that stuff.
Nice cocktail, small bars there too.
Yeah, who are the buyers? And the buyers are, for the big homes, they're, young and entrepreneurial, or if it's single level, they've got silver hair and they're wanting that, lock and leave and inner city vibe thing. Yeah, so work out who your buyers are. And if you're going for something, bear in mind our ageing population with money, there's a fair few of them. And if they're crawling all over a 2 or 3 bedroom single level terrace with a garage in Fitzroy North, well, maybe that's the product you want to be nabbing, because that's not going to stop. We're only just seeing the start of baby boomers going for stuff like that. We've still got a lot of retirement dates to get hit by boomers. That's just one example.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so go to where the money's going. What are people actually wanting? And I guess the same for tenants, right? Choose an asset that maybe those baby boomers can't necessarily purchase it, but they want the lifestyle, so they're going to rent it.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because in a lot of places that could be the case, but in that kind of precinct, your tenants are probably young professionals. They might be hospital workers. We've got a lot of hospitals in the inner north. So you've got to talk to a property manager about who the perfect tenant is for a property that you're considering, and make sure you tailor it to that. Yeah.
You're obviously a buyer's agent, which is amazing. It's always great to have a good buyer's agent on. One of the things I noticed with your background, and this is a bit of a selfish question, I'm seeing a lot of buyer's agents come up and they don't have any real estate background whatsoever. But you have a great real estate background. You know the finance side of things. You know the money side of things, which is pretty much, property is just finance with bricks and mortar in the middle. And then you've got the real estate sales background as well. What are the how much value does that add, having that real estate agent? Maybe that's not the right, maybe that's a bit of
it's a good question. You know what, the short answer is there's no university degree for this. If there was and I knew about it, I would have done it. And that's a hard thing for new entrants, because, where do you start? And I've seen people with all sorts of diverse backgrounds. I look at the Reba crew. We've got people with, masters and PhDs, and I think, yeah, I've got an honours degree, but that's, you know, no massive shock in the world of buyers agents. We come from all different kinds of backgrounds, and I've met accountants who do it really well. They've definitely got that fiscal analysis ability. I'm a chemist, but, you know, I think my analysis is what excites me and probably what differentiates me. I know a nurse who's done really well, so that discipline and that science background, and you can bring in a lot of different disciplines. A lot of valuers go into it, which is really interesting, and I've seen teachers do it. But I think the thing about having a little bit of real estate in your background is that you get an appreciation for how a real estate sales office works. If you've worked in property management, you understand how the leasing process works, and, you know, all of the things around residential tenancies. And if you've worked in other facets, you know, whether it be valuing or commercial real estate, you bring something to the table. That it's not a prerequisite. It just means that you have to learn it through someone else. And I think having a network, having mentors, really throwing yourself into it, probably working with someone else initially, it can be enormous for you. And the threat for any small buyers agency business is that you train up someone awesome and then they go and compete against you. And that is a fearful thought for a lot of BAs, and it's why the opportunities aren't abundant, because you need to feel that you're not just training someone up to go up against you. That's really hard. But again, if you take the view that, you know, there's a lot of work out there for buyers agents, and if you're really passionate about it, you know, there's enough room on the stage for a few of us. So you have to be prepared to seek the right mentors, I think.
So you guys at Reba, you see a whole heap of people coming through, and I imagine you reject some people that are not necessarily the buyers agents that you want within the community. So what are some of the questions that we can ask to determine what a good buyers agent is and what a not so good buyers agents are? I like to think about it like red flags. What are the red flags that should ping in my mind? What are some of the red flags?
We have a hashtag ask for experience, and I think that's really important. I really do, because it doesn't matter how nice you are and how smart you are. If you have no experience in property or limited experience, it's a hell of a risk for someone to take, to hand over, you know, a several $100,000 or $1 million decision. And it's not just about not buying a dud. It's getting something that in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, you can look at it and think, I could have bought all these other things at that time, but I bought this. And how's it tracking? And, you know, to go to someone with that a lot of experience is taking a risk. There are things that I can look at online and just say no way straight off the bat, because I know what to look for, whether it's understanding what sort of troublesome zoning it could have, or smelling a rat with the IC minutes, with the strata minutes when you're looking through a contract, working through things that can limit the use of the land, you know, whether it be easements, covenants. You've got to be on your game with all of that, and you'll learn that. And to be able to just step into the industry and say, I love property and I love people, let's do it, it's a big risk. So that's the biggest thing, ask for experience. But I also think you've got to be prepared to find someone that you can have an honest conversation with, because if you're working with a buyer's agent, they might feel like they're your new best friend because it's a tight relationship. But you've also got to be prepared to have any conversation with them, because if you have to have a hard conversation, you need to know you've got someone who's understanding, pragmatic, empathetic, and absolutely listening to you. You can't have someone talk you into something or steamroll you or dismiss you. So you have to be in a safe space, and only a consumer can feel that. And if their style with you, their communication style isn't making you comfortable, then they might not be the person for you. It doesn't mean they're not technically great. It just means that if you're feeling that you can't have that honest convo, you've probably got to keep looking.
Yeah, that could be a big one that you can definitely kind of overlook. And one of the other concerns that I have are when they are very good at communicating but not necessarily have those skills. to be able to purchase those type of properties. Is there a way to figure out those type of people? Because I've met some fantastic communicators that are great buyers agents, that are great communicators and not necessarily the best buyers. How do you identify those type of people?
You've got to ask for experience. You don't have to get them to give you their recent client list, but you want to see what they've purchased, what the story is, what are they writing, what are they putting out there, what do their newsletters look like, are they doing any blogs, have they got an Instagram account? Can you talk to any of their most recent past clients if you're really keen to understand? Is there anything about them on forums? And how long have they been around? What does their LinkedIn profile tell you? There's lots of ways to find out where someone has come from. And there's I've met people that have come out of house and land sales and they're amazing. I've met people that have come out of HR type roles and learnt the craft and they're amazing. So it doesn't mean that they won't be good, but if you're looking for experience, there's a few ways to find it.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay, I'm gonna hijack. Let's get back onto the investing. It is if people want to go and use VAs, that's I want to hear more about Cate's wisdom and knowledge and show what a great VA she is. So I want to understand. I believe you have a checkbox approach, Cate. Correct me wrong if you call it something else. And that enables you to make sort of quick decisions. Is that kind of your your IP, or what sort of things? Even if it's a couple of things, what things do you look for when you look at a property? You mentioned easements. You mentioned minutes, strata minutes.
Yeah, so the first thing we do is, if it's an investment, we work out what sort of investment it is. So if you think of capital growth at one end of the scale and rental yield at the other, they're polar opposites. They don't go hand in hand. So if you're really looking for capital growth performance and you've got the cash flows for that, you've got enough years in your working timeline to cover that, and that's the pathway to your end goal, well, then I'll be picking capital growth assets. And depending on the budget, that will most likely be on its own full block. It typically wouldn't be a strata property. And after that, I will have a checklist so let's say I'm looking at houses and the mandate is that they've got to be period houses and they've got to have, minimum 2 bedrooms and I'm working to a budget. I'm looking for a variety of things. If that client's really keen to add value or happy to do a renovation down the track, I can take note of that. But ideally, I'm not buying people projects unless they're really keen on that. So I'm looking for something that is rent ready. And so I say to people, you don't have to love it and want to live in it, but I want you to be proud of it. So that's the first thing. I don't want something they're ashamed of. That goes against the grain. And then we're looking for proximity to shops and station, ideally. If we're doing, let's say inner ring, middle ring, I want it to have good amenity. I want to make sure its floor plan is good. And if it ultimately needs a renovation and the floor plan has the wet areas where I don't want wet areas, that's a more expensive reconfiguration than your standard layout. So I'm always looking at that. I'm looking for invisible issues that could cost a lot of money. So little hints, things that if I can see something that I'm very confident a building inspector will get worried about, well, I don't really want to shortlist it and waste $600 on a building inspection. I'm just going to say it's got subsidence, cracking, or it's got massive issues under the shower, or whatever it might be that's making me just red flag it. I don't want to do it. And then I'll be looking for streetscape. So I'm looking for a street that's welcoming. I can easily park my car in. You don't want to buy a property that you come out in the morning, you remember which street you parked your car in. That's no fun. I'm looking for anything that could cause social disturbance. I'm looking for anything nearby that could, devalue the property or not be great to be near. So, for example, high voltage power lines are one of those big box things right at the front, or any kind of social disturbance. So let's say there's a rugged house or a bad block of flats or something within close proximity, or you've got to be cognizant of flight paths and bus routes. Is there a bus ripping past your house every few minutes, or is a bus stop out the front so you hear that every time it pulls up? So they're the things that we have to be right across. And if it's got any deal breakers, the answer is no. And I separate my criterion into must-have and nice-to-have. If it's missing a must-have, it's not on the list. It doesn't matter how pretty it is, how cheap it is, how cool it is. It's off the list. And if it's missing a lot of nice-to-haves, but it's nailing the must-haves, well, it might not be a super high scorer, but it will be a good scorer. So that is how I approach property selection.
Yeah. So you build up like an actual score around like, okay, cool, this is an 86. We're looking for a 90.
I wish it was like that. It's too subjective, and the reason
they want an algorithm.
Yeah, what does a power minus?
Okay, well, I'll put it this way, Joe. Let's say the house is worth 800,000 in today's market, and I've given it an 85. What's it worth if the agent says, I'll sell it to you quickly for 740? It's more than 85 points then, isn't it?
Yeah.
160, I think, probably.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a pretty good score if you can buy an $800,000 asset for 740 and it's already ticking the boxes. That it gets more points. So there's subjectivity to it. It really is. And for somebody who doesn't want to do any work, well, the awesome house with more points, but it needs a full kitchen reno, that person won't assign the same number of points. So I'm really careful about assigning, an exact score. But if I'm working with the one client and I present two properties, and I've got a really good example of this, I did on one tonight. So this one's a high scorer. I give it over 95. The other one, it's good, but I give it over 90. So that gave him perspective to go, all right, fine. But the price point's different too. So it comes down to, what value you place on it and how excited you are until you hit that price increment where you say, yeah, no, at anything above that, I'm happy for someone else to have it. Well, that's when it's lost enough points.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's a great way to look at it.
So I'm but before we, because I want to be mindful of your time. We've had a long day, of course, as well. So I want to know. So you we spoke about the property itself. Have you got an area, like how much credence do you pay on things like days on markets, vacancy rates, owner occupancy? So these sort of metrics. Do you look at those sort of things that much, or
sure do? Yeah, absolutely. In this market, days on market isn't a very accurate measure because days on market's like 1 for everything. It's horrible.
It is true, yes, particularly on the south. I mean, all over the country, but in my areas as well. There
are metrics, and I don't particularly like something that's got no transport links. That is problematic. But if someone said shop for me, on the peninsula or a holiday-based location, I wouldn't be doing that for capital growth reasons, but I would be looking at properties that I feel represent less volatility for them. But if we're talking about capital growth assets in regional and capital cities, then you've got to make sure that you're avoiding areas that are subject to changes that might create issues down the track. You've got to look at urban planning, look at flood levels, all that kind of stuff. But when we just look at the metrics, clearly, the things that worry me are low socioeconomic areas that aren't showing a chance of change, because that can be a really huge headache for a landlord. It's okay if you're doing it on a speculative basis and you're hoping for gentrification, but if there's no chance in hell of gentrification, then what are you doing? And if you're chasing really good rental yields, just be prepared for some of that to be whittled away with chasing rent and vacancy rates and fixing up properties, because it can absolutely strike, and I know all about it because I've made the mistake of going into some really tough areas. And you've also got to look at obviously the take-up rate. How many tenants there want to rent, and is it volatile? You've got to look at price volatility, job volatility, vacancy rate volatility. You can get some really good examples if you look at mining booms and busts around Australia, and over the last 10 years we've had so many sad case scenarios. You've also got to look. Oh, there's so many. I remember going to an expo, showing my age because it's all about podcasts now, but I went to an expo 2011. We had a stand there when I was working in a different firm, and I had to wander around. There all of these places with little dioramas of little dongas and huts and dual lock thingies and just mining town off the plan stuff. It was phenomenal, and it was everywhere, and it was all about, you can't go wrong. Well, they went wrong, and it didn't end well. I saw, valves that were just horrendous. So, there's some good case in points to look back at, a retrospective study where everyone thought build it and they will come. And you've also got to look at population. If it's declining, if it's too small a base to pull in people with higher incomes, has it got a university? Has it got a hospital? If you're going for a small town with a small population, you'll be really certain that you know what you're doing, because I've seen a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
What does a small town look like for yourself? Because I had my number at 15K, but Adam Maney, who called you a legend, he said he doesn't want to buy anything under 25,000. Oh, I think we've lost Kate. I think her pods have died. Yep. I think her. So Joe, what's whilst we should have some music.
Entirely.
So
we've lost her entirely.
Yeah. So Joe, what do you want to ask me or audience? Ask us a question, because I'm sure Kate will jump back on. I think she just had some issues with her pods. What do you want to know about? What do you want to talk about, Joe? Well, I've got a few minutes. We don't get this opportunity very often.
Yeah, mate. I'm just, I don't know.
Ask me a question. Yeah, and I'll answer it. What do you want to know, Joe? What do you want to know about what's next?
What do I want to know from Jeff Miles? What do I want to know from Jeff Miles? Well, I guess I had questions around. I had a question for Kate just now. You asked me a question, mate. Sorry, I'm not thinking.
Okay.
We're terrible.
I could answer Kate's back. I mean, I could almost answer any question, Joe. Maybe not so much. They'll need to. So Kate's on, but she said that device is not connected. So this is live TV. If you didn't know that this was, they will need to connect the mic cam before you can add them to the stream. I think we're actually going to struggle with this. Do you want to flick Kate a message, Joe? Because I've got. Well. So I think she's back. Okay. What made you reach out to Kate? So I'll answer.
I'm
you're
so
back.
sorry.
She's back.
Yeah,
that's
my phone
right.
rang. I'm so sorry.
It's not your fault.
I think
you're lucky. You missed out.
I kind of wanted to hear what. I wanted to see what the Cronulla market was like, Joe, and there was all these questions I had planned for you. And no, thanks for coming back, Kate.
Oh.
I'll answer this one question as to what made me reach out to Kate. You spelled it with 2 F's, but that's okay. I'll forgive you this once. So the reason I reached out to Kate was I was reading a whole bunch of books at the time. Steve McKnight, Jane Slack-Smith was one of them, I believe. I read one of her books. I read this whole bunch of books. I mean, there was another. They're all based in Melbourne, I think, ironically. So a lot of property champions in Melbourne. But I just thought, it's a habit of mine to just connect with people, and I've done it a little less recently because it's just so busy running a group. And I just thought, I want to see what can I help this person with, and what can I learn from them as well, because they've been there, they've walked the walk, they've talked the talk, and I was sort of looking to kind of understand my own property journey. So that's the reason I reached out to Kate. And I saw that she was, So Joe, you had a couple of questions.
Well, I've only got one more question left. Because I'm just cautious of time. What are some of the underrated areas of Victoria that people should be looking in that might be overlooked a little bit?
Oh, I like this question. I don't usually sign up for hotspots, but
well, I'm not asking for a hotspot.
A good tip for something that I think is set to change. So we're really talking gentrification, and if that's what you're alluding to, and also value for money. I do think that if we're looking at everyone's done the whole no apartments. We're not looking at apartments, but if we look at really boutique blocks and consider great generous layouts, particularly 3-bedders, we can't keep dismissing those. And there's,
So
I also
COVID,
look at,
home.
yeah, and I think taking an opportunistic angle and, you know, signing up for a cheap one better because its prices hit the floor, that's not a strategy. But if you're willing to look at apartments on their merits, and when I talk about a boutique block, I really mean, you know, less than 20 in the block. But if you understand what the land content is and you understand what the inherent value of the dwelling is, because it's depreciated over time, you could be sitting on something that's worth a fair bit of money, whether it's to a future developer or whatever. But if you're talking capital growth and you've got the benefit of something with great proximity, and you can do, you know, buy something that's been renovated or do something yourself, I think that, you know, apartments shouldn't just be on the nose because of a thought that all apartments are bad. And apartments had a really good run a long time ago, and they've not done so well of late. But I think we've got to keep a focus on the rate of capital appreciation in all of these areas, and the apartments are kind of languishing now. That parity between houses and apartments has really grown. So that's one point I'll make. Another one, I think that, you know, some of those areas that are going to benefit from future infrastructure links, we can't dismiss. And if we look at, you know, Melbourne, we've got the inner metro ring, and then we're having an outer one as well. Have a look at what's going on there and which suburbs are going to be the winners from that. That's a bit of a tip. And in my very own backyard, I'm in the inner west, and we've got Footscray not far away. I think Footscray's got so much in store for us. I don't think we've even seen the beginning of it. It's got places in Broadsheet. It's got some of the most amazing food. It's still got a very grungy feel. It's still got, you know, a perception and a reality that there's segments of it where crime is uncomfortable at night. And so when you look at some of the beautiful streets and houses going in Footscray and that river precinct along the Maribyrnong, I don't think we can keep dismissing it and rolling our eyes because it's so very close to the city and there's lots happening. And if you look at the urban plan, it is quite exciting. I also am a huge rep for Altona. I love Altona. It's around the corner from Williamstown. It's coastal. Yeah, it's not the prettiest beach on the planet, but it's on the west side. Yeah, but it's got a fantastic shopping strip and more cafe kind of strip, and I think it's got a lot in store for us as well. And it's an interesting one because it's got refineries around it. And you get off the freeway, go down Millers Road, you're going past, you know, tanks and stuff like that. And some people have called me and said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Keep driving." But that, you know, they're two in my very own backyard. But I also have a real soft spot for the coast along the southeast. So when you're stretching past Brighton and you're going into, you know, the city of Kingston and heading towards Frankston, there's this, you know, little strip that is just incredible, and the beaches are some of the nicest, you know, in Port Phillip Bay. And I think you've got rail amenity and a really cool vibe down there. And we've got Eastlink, which makes getting around the city a little easier for the inhabitants over that side of town. So that's another of my tips. And where else would I tip? I'm a big rep for Thomastown and Laylaw because they're following that high street trajectory, and we've seen a lot of overflow. You know, all of the people that couldn't afford Northcote years ago went to Thornbury, and then the Thornbury people went to Preston, and Preston went to Reservoir, and you just get your head around crossing the ring road. You know, Thomastown has some bigger blocks and some, you know, 3 triple fronted brick veneer houses, and it's got a community there that's pretty cool, and I think it's going to do good things as well.
Wow. I wanted to circle back to the western suburbs. Do you think that there's a premiership in the western suburbs sort of future as well? I'm talking about AFL here, of course. I know you're not really much of a fan, but the Dogs, the Western Bulldogs, are close to the top of the ladder.
It's funny you say that because I always shoot the guys down on the podcast. Don't let Dave and Pete talk about sport because I don't want our podcast to be about sport, but I'm a Cats supporter. So, you know, Geelong, I made a promise to my grandpa when I was 9 and he was dying. Like, he was seriously not very many days away from death, and made me promise I'd barrack for the Cats. So that promise stands. But when the Cats are out of the finals and the Doggies get up, it is pretty cool. And when they won the premiership, it was actually my birthday. And we had ages and ages ago booked a long table at the Spotswood pub, which is this really cool sort of a bit bogan pub and it was me and all my mates. And when it became apparent the doggies were playing in the grand final, they had big screens and everything. Like, this pub went off, and we had the best table in the house, and they ran out of beer jugs. And so the proprietors were saying, if you bring your jug back, we'll fill it for free. It was the most awesome party.
I'm sorry I brought this up, because this is a very painful experience for me, because the team that they beat in 2016
Oh no!
was, of course, the Sydney Swans. So I was watching that grand final, and I said they can't lose this. I mean, the Western Bulldogs are 7th, right? And for a team to win the premiership in
awesome.
7th place, it was pretty sad day.
Oh yeah, like those weird guys in high-vis jackets in the pub crying. It was a really good moment. I've never had a buzz like that.
1962, or it had been 60 years, or
ages.
Quite a good amount of time.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping actually that Melbourne, if it's not the Swans and the Demons, because they're long suffering, have won a premiership since the 50s, I think. Don't quote me. 70 years. So anyway, back to property. Sorry for all those that just tuned out, and thank you for embellishing my guilty footy pleasure. So should we go on to some audience questions, because there were some that were submitted before and some we've sort of covered. So let's wrap this little one in a nice bow before we send you on your hopefully very, very safe. So the question that one of the questions that I had, and throw some in the box, we'll probably take one from the audience. So Fi, Kim Houtz, sorry if I've mispronounced that. So I've got my views, and I've had a few chats with Fi. She's asked how to become a rich property investor, and which area is good for investment and still low price. So he's spoken about some areas. There's a lot to unpack there, but I want to this is almost a myth. What do you think about becoming rich from property? How does it work?
It's a myth.
It's a long game. It's a really long game. Not a myth though.
Yeah.
And how do you define richness and wealth? If you've got a goal that's achievable and you start young, you've got time on your side. That is the most potent ingredient. It really is. I've talked about this many times. But if you start in your 20s, and if you can get a capital growth asset, that's an enormous head start for you. And if you're looking at when to buy your capital growth asset, buying it towards the start of your journey as opposed to towards the end makes a lot of sense. You don't want to buy it so early that you've wiped yourself out of cash flow and you absolutely can't do anything else and your back's against the wall and you're having a miserable life. But you need to buy it when you can afford to sustain the shortfall, and you'll get some equity growth. And you might not get it in the first year. Hopefully you do, but you might have to wait a couple of years. But if you're willing to be patient, once you've got equity, this thing keeps growing. It doesn't just stop growing and that's it, you've bought one more property. It continues to bear fruit for you. And as you get towards, closer to the other end of your working life, you're buying properties that haven't got horrible negative cash flows, because you're looking at retiring and you want to have these nest eggs giving you a return. That's if you're a buy and hold investor. But if you start early enough and you're patient enough, you can build wealth, and you can have a 6-figure income stream out of unencumbered properties if you get it right and you get started at the beginning. You don't need to be a wealthy person to be able to do that. You've got to model out how you're going to retire that debt. But I don't think that anyone looking at how they can do that on a 30-year loan term, thinking seriously about their ability to service the debt, they can model out how many they need to have. But let's say you have 4 properties under your belt and they're good ones. Then if you do that early enough in your working life and you hit retirement, you should have a pretty good retirement income. And that's 4. I know there's people in this group that will be aspiring to more than that.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of depends on where. Sorry, go.
You mentioned smaller price properties. I'm not going to knock that, but there is a price point where the property will deliver you more headache and won't give you that capital growth. And if you're towards, the later end, they serve their purpose for some people. But if it's giving you headaches, that's not great. If it's giving you fantastic rental return and you're not paying for high strata fees and nasty outgoings, if it's delivering you a really good gross rental yield and there's not too many outgoings, then that might be a great little earner for you. That's contributing to your post-retirement income. You don't just get rid of something because it's not giving you lots of capital growth if it's giving you plenty of yield and it's just about unencumbered. So you've got to work out what the blend is for you. I think it's wrong when people just say, I'm only buying, blue chip, expensive, beautiful stuff in the inner ring, because you'll only be able to buy a couple in most cases. We're not all anaesthetists and brain surgeons and high court judges.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually something that when we started this group is what I keep hearing time and again in just a different way, is that just because you can't afford a property doesn't mean you should get the lowest value property. And I think that's where I made my mistake with my first property. I told my buyers, this is all I can afford, right? I need to get a property. And then this person's like, well, I'm going to lose my commission if I don't do this. So I'm going to have to find him the cheapest, rubbish, worst property that I can find him, because it's the most affordable that he can afford in an area that's got nothing going for it, that's not going to go anywhere, that has bad cash flow. But I should not have gotten into that property. I should have saved for another year, another 6 months or whatever, and purchased a property that actually had something going for it. So that's one of my big takeaways is don't get so sucked into this cash flow only. Yeah, the cash flow might be great, but what is an extra $100 when you earn a salary, when you earn a decent salary? It's absolutely nothing. What is going to matter is compounding growth of 1%, which isn't going to go anywhere, or 6%, 7%, 8%. That's what you need to be aiming for. Don't get, for the people that haven't yet started, don't just look at cash flow. Obviously not financial advice or anything like that, but don't get sucked into that, I need to buy a property. What's the most cheapest one I can find so I can do that? Yeah. Okay.
I agree, Joe. I could talk about that for another 10 minutes, but
okay.
I think so to Max did ask, and they asked the question earlier about where to buy now. I think we sort of already spoke. We did a we did a bit of that. So if you had any more specific questions, let us know. This is one from Fayyad Rahim, and I like Fayyad when he comments because he really challenges the way I answer a question, and I just enjoy that because I know that he's not just going to say, "That's great, Jeff." He'll actually sort of say, "Well, have you thought about X, Y, and Z?" And I love when people do that because it sort of gets me out of my comfort zone a little bit. But he wants to know what we sort of speak about this, but it'd be good to wrap it up again. And this is kind of. So what metrics should people look at? Or what do you, we spoke a little bit about those things, but how should you start? He's sort of saying, should they analyze them at a wide level and then an area and then suburb respectively? I don't know. So I think he's saying, should you look at, let's say, should you look at Victoria or should you look at New South Wales, or should you go that, or should you start the other direction? Should you go, okay, I'm going to focus on, so how would you start your selection, Kate?
With metrics first, sorry, I've got this cat that's driving me mad. Say hi to my cat.
I was going to ask
the tail. Oh, she's back. You start with numbers first. So you got your metrics. You know what sort of price point you're looking at focusing on. You know what sort of rental yield you need. You know what sort of vacancy rates you're after. Yeah. And then you've got to find where does it exist. Now, for someone like me, I can easily work that out because I'm so familiar with this market. But if you're looking at a particular state and it doesn't exist, it doesn't mean that it's not going to exist in another state, but you'll need to chat to some people. So I always start with the metrics first, and then you can work your way through it. I think if you throw a dart at a dartboard and then you're searching through, a lot of options, it will make it really hard. And back in the day, I used to, pour through those magazines and read the tables at the back and get a feel for the various suburbs that were offering particular metrics. And I've learnt along the way that avoiding the teeny tiny little suburbs with limited sales data and small populations just takes out that variability and that volatility as well. So if you're going for well-known suburbs and you can see what they're yielding, you can see the median house price and median unit price, that's where you start. And you can get that off tables. You can go onto your local state government sales data. In Victoria, we've got valuer general data, and it looks pretty similar to those magazines. You've got to dedicate yourself, but this is what it's all about. We're all here on a Wednesday night at, what time is it? Nearly 9 o'clock, because we love it.
Thank you as well. I know you've got a family at home, so
Watching The Simpsons, I can hear them.
Oh.
Simpsons. Oh, gee. Turn
There
that
you
off.
Are there any kind of questions are there any things that we haven't brought up that you would like to kind of talk about, or you would like to dig deeper into more? I always like to ask that question because there's always so much in property and there's always so much to a person. I always don't feel like I always know that there may be something. What have I missed?
You probably missed market sentiment right here, right now. So we're having this crazy run, and people are looking in the rearview mirror saying, "Oh, I should have bought when you told me to buy." We didn't know it was going to do this. I had a pretty educated guess that it was going to come back.
Yeah.
I didn't think that we'd do 15% since our Melbourne gates opened after our big long lockdown, and I didn't understand the ferocity of the market, at the time, let alone now. But I think we've got to look at this sensibly and say to ourselves, well, we've got record low interest rates and we've got all kinds of incentives, and we've got, a lot of people who are feeling excited by property and this sense of consumer confidence. I don't think it's about to stop. I think the rate of crazy growth will slow down a bit to a moderated level of craziness, but I don't think people should think that we're about to have a market drop and sit it out. We've had 2 declines within very close proximity of each other when we had the lead up to the federal election and the hangover of the Banking Royal Commission and the credit squeeze. Then we set off on a pretty sharp run, and then COVID hit, and that was a tiny reprieve. In Melbourne we had probably 2 to 3 weeks of decent buying conditions, and then it was pretty competitive again. I don't think we can hang out and wait for things to decline. The people that are waiting for a market crash might be entirely placed out of the market they're wanting to get into. That's probably the one thing I would open up and talk about.
Yeah, we could actually have a whole session on market sentiment, and maybe in 9 months' time we'll have to, if you'll come back, we'll have to consider having you back, Kate, just to talk about that. I kind of wanted to dig deeper into asset selection. Becoming a fantastic asset selector as well, because we dove around it and sort of touched the edges, but I don't think we really. It'd be good to just focus on market sentiment, asset selection. But anyway, we did have one last question. I promise this is it. So this will dovetail into. Sorry to bring this up in front of your face, but I want to see who it actually. So Adam, this is from Adam again, who called you a legend.
How could anyone read it in that time, mate? You got to leave it up.
No, Adam was wanting to know, do I talk to people about what their strategy is and what the end goal is, and how do they get to the debt retirement, and is my overarching strategy discussion taking that into account? Absolutely it is. There are some people who can't do buy and hold as their strategy because they've left it too late, and they need to take some heady risk and build up some equity in the remaining high income time frame that they've got, but they can't afford to hold all of those assets. So we then need to model in what does it look like for them to sell down one or some in order to have unencumbered property with rental proceeds? Or are they going to take debt into retirement and, go to their grave with debt, but still have all of this money? Now, getting equity loans without an income is a much harder thing to do these days. And so that entire premise of just building up wealth and then living off debt that's you've accumulated in the form of equity, it's not as easy to do with the lenders these days. And then there are people like me who want to hit retirement with all of their properties unencumbered. I don't want to sell any of them. I want to enjoy that rent. So yes, it plays a huge part, and it comes down to how many years they want to continue working for, how many years they can continue working for, what sort of cash flows can they apportion to holding their property, and how much money do they want to retire on. Because if you've got a modest type idea of what you want to retire on, you might be able to do it with less properties. So yes, in answer, I do.
Not about the number of properties, it's about the outcome, as I've heard you say before.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I feel we should have almost started with that, because that was so we could. Yeah. Anyway, that'll be a conversation probably for another time. So Joe, I think we've. Is there anything before we do wrap it up? I want to give you the opportunity. If people want to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to find you? You can drop a link in the comments as well. What's the best way?
Just my name, catebakos.com.au. That's my site,
Yep.
and you can drop me a line. My email's there. I'm pretty easy to find, and yeah, I'd be.
You probably can't catch up with coffee with everybody. If you send her an email, she might not be. I mean, she's a very busy lady, of course. But
and what's the podcast name? I didn't know there was a podcast.
Yeah,
I did my
it's the property planner, buyer. The property planner, buyer, and professor. It's a bit of a handful. The property planner, buyer, and professor. So Dave Johnson is the planner, and Pete Kalizos is the property professor. 3 of us have been buddies for
over
a
in
while,
Adelaide,
and we do that weekly. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's great. That's an awesome combo. So many different insights mashed together.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun. Yeah.
I have a lot of respect.
Yeah, they're good guys.
I've never spoken to Pete, but I have a lot of. I've heard him on a couple of podcasts here and there, and just he talks so much sense. It's like speaking to your dad. I was going to say grandpa, but I don't want to say that. My yeah, it's like speaking to
Pete's
when you
he's so wise.
Yeah, yeah. So we'd love to get Pete on. I don't know how to reach out to him. So I'm going to probably know. Send him an email.
Looking for a lead here.
Yeah.
Oh, if only we knew someone who knew Pete.
I'll get you in touch.
Yeah.
If only. Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I wanted to acknowledge that you would take. I mean, we're an hour and a half in. This is ridiculous. We got to stop doing these.
I'm sorry.
But I appreciate you spending so much time.
Yeah. I promise it'll be an hour. No
but
worries.
you've dropped so much value, and I think that a lot of people are going to get a lot of like just the little tips and tricks. We're going to cut them up into bite-sized chunks for people to digest, and I think there's a whole heap of stuff around the strategy and asset selection, and some really good locations that people should definitely check out. Anything you wanted to cover off? Anything else you wanted to cover off, Kate?
No, I think if you guys want to think of a follow-up series, next year or whatever, just give me a go and we'll reconvene. And if you've got any listener questions, feel free to tag me and I will answer them.
Perfect. Yeah, keep this thread going, guys. If you get any questions. Jeff, anything from you, mate?
I just want to say very grateful for that coffee we did a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now. Actually, I feel the world has changed, but you just you're one of the most genuine people in property, and probably it's hard to say the most genuine because I haven't met every person in property, but you are absolutely down to earth, and I suppose coming from a single parent mum household, you probably I hope there's a lot of women and girls, and not just women and girls, but boys as well, that are watching this and just taking that you can make it happen. It's not too hard. So yeah, that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted. So awesome for you flying the flag for everybody. But I wanted to put. Crystal said, cheesecake inspirational, and Crystal asked a lot of questions. I love the questions she asked as well. So yeah, let's wrap it up.
Amazing. Okay. See you guys. Let's go buy a property. That's what we need to do. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You can stay on if you want, Kate.